There are questions people ask casually, the kind that sound harmless until you realize how dangerous the answers can be. What's the strangest thing you've ever lived through? Do you believe places remember us? What still tightens your chest when the room goes quiet? I used to deflect those questions with humor, with small stories that didn't matter, with versions that felt safe to tell. This one isn't safe. Before I go any further, let me say this. If stories rooted in real fear, psychological dread, and things that don't announce themselves are what keep you watching till the very end, take a second now. Subscribe to the channel, tap like, share it with someone who enjoys the darker corners of storytelling, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time of day this found you. Because once I start, there's no clean place to stop. I never believed houses could feel wrong, not haunted, not cursed, just off. Like they were waiting for you to notice something you weren't supposed to. The house on Alder Creek Road didn't look abandoned. That was the first lie it told me. It sat at the edge of a quiet town in the northern Midwest, one of those places people pass through without realizing it exists. The kind of town where the roads stretch longer than the conversations, where the sky feels too big for the number of people living under it. We moved there because it checked every practical box. Space. Silence. A yard that backed into a line of old trees that locals called a green belt, but behaved more like a border. It was meant to be a fresh start. I'm the one who pushed for it. My name is Calder Haynes. At the time, I worked remotely for an archival research firm, mostly old property histories, municipal records, forgotten things that needed cataloging. My partner, Rowan, was a pediatric occupational therapist who'd been burned out by city life. And our daughter, Elowen, was 8, quiet, observant, and always noticing patterns where others didn't. The listing photos made the house feel welcoming. Neutral colors, sunlight, wide hallways, a finished basement that looked like it had hosted decades of ordinary family moments. When we arrived, the first thing I noticed wasn't the size. It was the stillness, not peaceful, not calm, stagnant, as if the air inside the house hadn't adjusted to new occupants yet. Rowan chalked it up to nerves. Moving does that. New walls always feel unfamiliar. Elowen didn't say anything. She just stood at the threshold longer than necessary, fingers tightening around the strap of her backpack. "Do you like it?" I asked her. She nodded. Too quickly. The house didn't make noise the way old houses usually do. No settling sounds. No pipes announcing themselves. No gentle complaints from the structure adjusting to new weight. At night, the quiet felt manufactured. The first week passed without incident. Boxes unpacked, schedules adjusted. Rowan returned to work. Elowen started at a new school. I stayed home, setting up my office in what had once been a small guest room on the second floor. From the window, I could see the tree line, a dense, uneven wall of dark branches that seemed closer at night than during the day. That was when Elowen mentioned the walls. It happened over breakfast. She stirred her cereal, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. "Dad," she said, "does the house have layers?" I smiled, expecting a child's imagination at work. "What do you mean? Like rooms inside the walls?" Rowan laughed softly. "Every house has walls, sweetheart." Elowen shook her head. "I mean spaces, narrow ones." I felt something tighten in my throat. "Why do you think that?" I asked. She shrugged. "Because sometimes it feels like something shifts when I'm not looking." Rowan reached for her coffee. New place, new sounds. But Elowen wasn't talking about sounds. That night, Rowan fell asleep quickly. I stayed awake longer than usual, scrolling through emails, letting exhaustion eventually take me. Sometime later, no idea when, I woke with the sensation that the house had changed posture, like a person straightening after pretending to rest. I listened. Nothing. Then, faintly, I felt it through the mattress rather than heard it. Pressure, moving along the inner structure of the house. Not footsteps, not vibration. More like weight redistributing itself. I told myself it was imagination. I had to. The next morning, Elowen didn't want to use her bedroom. She asked if she could move her homework into our room, then her books, then her night lamp. "I don't like it in there when it's dark," she said carefully, like she was testing each word before letting it out. "What happens?" Rowan asked. Elowen hesitated. "It feels like something is standing very close, even when there's nothing there." That was the moment Rowan stopped smiling. Over the next few days, small changes accumulated. Cabinet doors left exactly where we were sure we'd closed them. Furniture that felt subtly repositioned, not enough to accuse, but enough to notice. Cold pockets of air in hallways that shouldn't have been drafty. I started sleeping lighter, not because of noise, because of anticipation. I'd wake with the certainty that something had just finished moving. Elowen began complaining of headaches, then nausea, then exhaustion. Her teacher emailed Rowan about her attention slipping, about her staring at the walls during lessons. One afternoon, I found Elowen sitting cross-legged on the floor of her room, tracing the seam where the wall met the baseboard. "What are you doing?" I asked. She didn't look up, trying to find where it stops. Where what stops? The thin part. I crouched beside her. The wall felt solid. Normal. "Elowen," I said gently, "has something scared you?" She finally looked at me. Her eyes were too serious for her age. "It doesn't want me to leave the room." That night, something happened that forced us to stop rationalizing. Rowan was in the shower. I was downstairs, reviewing a property deed for work, when Elowen screamed. Not startled, not surprised, terrified. I was up the stairs in seconds. She was standing in the hallway outside her room, shaking, her face drained of color. "It was there," she said. "Right next to me." "Where?" Rowan demanded, wrapping a towel around herself. "In the corner, between the wall and the door." I searched the room. Closet, under the bed, bathroom. Nothing. "What did it look like?" I asked. Elowen swallowed. "It looked like the dark got thicker." That description sat with me in a way no other detail ever had. From that point on, the house felt aware of our attention. The activity, if that's what it was, focused almost entirely on Elowen. Lights flickering only when she entered a room, her toys ending up stacked in ways she hadn't left them, her drawings changing between the time she started and finished them. I found one sketch folded into her backpack, a rough charcoal image of a shape standing sideways, pressed flat against a wall. When I asked her about it, she said she hadn't drawn it that way. "It moved after," she whispered. Sleep became impossible. Rowan insisted we bring in help, not spiritual, not religious, structural, psychological, anything with credentials. The inspector found nothing wrong with the house. The child therapist suggested stress, adjustment disorder, projection. I wanted to believe them. But then I started noticing things when Elowen wasn't around. The house responded differently when she left. Quieter. Less tense. Like it was waiting. One evening, while Rowan was working late and Elowen was at a friend's house, I stood alone in the hallway outside Elowen's room. The air there felt compressed. I placed my palm against the wall. It was warmer than it should have been, and beneath it, faint but unmistakable, I felt something push back. Not a vibration. Resistance. I pulled my hand away like I'd touched something alive. That was when I began researching the property. Not the official records. The gaps. Old zoning maps. Unrecorded amendments. A stretch of years where ownership changed without explanation. I found mention of a structure that predated the neighborhood. Something temporary. Never meant to last. A place where people were kept apart from the rest of the town. No names. No details. Just references to containment. That night, Elowen refused to sleep. She clutched Rowan's hand, eyes darting toward the walls. "It's closer," she said. "It learned where I am." Rowan looked at me, fear finally overriding logic. "Cal," she whispered, "we need to leave." But houses don't always let go easily. And whatever shared that space with us had already decided Elowen belonged there. There's a point in every slow disaster where denial becomes harder work than fear. I crossed that line the morning I realized the house behaved differently, depending on who was inside it. When Elowen left for school, the pressure eased. The air felt thinner, less weighted. The hallways relaxed, like muscles unclenching after being held tight too long. When she returned, the atmosphere shifted again. Subtle, immediate, as if something within the structure had been alerted. Rowan noticed it too. She didn't say it out loud at first, neither did I. We moved around each other carefully, afraid that speaking the truth would make it more solid. Elowen stopped sleeping alone. Her mattress moved into our room, wedged against the wall beneath the window. She insisted on keeping the lights low, but never fully off. "The dark feels organized," she said once, voice thin, like it knows where to wait. That sentence still crawls through me when I think about it. I began documenting everything. Not because I believed it would fix anything, but because I needed proof that this wasn't happening only in my head. Dates, locations in the house, Elowen's mood before and after, temperature shifts, electrical irregularities. Patterns emerged faster than I expected. Whatever was there responded to attention. It intensified when ignored, and it adapted. The first escalation happened in the kitchen. I was washing dishes while Elowen colored at the table. Rowan sat nearby, scrolling through emails on her phone. A normal scene, almost peaceful. Elowen froze mid-stroke. Her crayon hovered just above the paper. "Dad," she said quietly, "is the house allowed to listen?" The question didn't make sense. Before I could answer, every cabinet door along the far wall opened at once. Not violently, not loudly. In sequence. As if something had walked past them, touching each handle with intention. Rowan dropped her phone. Elowen didn't scream. She didn't cry. She stared. And then she said something that made my skin prickle. "It's showing you." That was the moment Rowan broke. She grabbed her keys, her bag, and said we were leaving for the night. Hotel. Anywhere. The house resisted in small ways. Doors sticking, lights failing. The garage refusing to respond on the first attempt. When we finally pulled away, Elowen slumped against the seat, exhausted. "I think it's mad," she murmured. The motel was loud, bright, alive with other people's noise. Elowen slept for the first time in days. Rowan cried in the bathroom, soundless, shoulders shaking. I stayed awake, scrolling through archived forums, town records, anything that might give context to what we were dealing with. That was when I found the first mention of the corridor. Not a hallway, a corridor, buried in a scanned planning document from decades earlier, barely legible, referencing a temporary internal partition system installed during a short-lived municipal initiative. No photographs, no clear explanation, just a phrase that stuck with me. Non-standard spatial solutions implemented for containment purposes. Containment of what? The next day, we returned to the house. It felt offended. That's the only word that fits. The air was dense, unmoving. The silence felt compressed, like it was being held down. Elowen clutched my hand the moment we stepped inside. "It doesn't like that we left," she whispered. Over the next several days, the manifestations grew bolder. Lights dimmed when Elowen entered a room. Her reflection in windows lagged behind her movements, not distorted, just delayed. Walls seemed to narrow when she passed through hallways. Rowan stopped, letting Elowen out of her sight. I reached out to a local historian I'd worked with once, someone who specialized in forgotten municipal projects. He hesitated when I mentioned Alder Creek Road. Then he asked me something that made my stomach sink. "Does the house feel layered?" I didn't answer immediately. "Some places were built to divide," he continued. "Not rooms, people." He explained that during a brief period of social panic decades earlier, the town had experimented with isolating individuals deemed disruptive. Not criminals, not patients, just problems. They weren't jailed, they weren't treated, they were hidden. Temporary structures, internal partitions, living spaces designed to compress and restrict without obvious signs of confinement. The initiative was shut down quickly. Records destroyed or reclassified, properties sold and renovated. But not everything was removed. Some structures remained inside the walls. Some intentions lingered. That night, Elowen woke screaming. Not crying, screaming words. "It's in the narrow place! It's pressed flat! It can't turn around!" I bolted upright. The air in the room felt wrong, thick, strained, vibrating with tension. Rowan wrapped her arms around Elowen, whispering reassurances that sounded thin even to my own ears. Elowen pointed toward the wall behind the headboard. "It wants my shape," she said. That sentence shattered something inside me. The next morning, I found marks on the wall. Not scratches, indentations, as if something had leaned into the surface repeatedly, testing its limits. Rowan wanted to leave again, permanently. But fear does strange things to logic. I needed answers. I contacted a group that investigated anomalous environments. Not ghost hunters, not spiritualists. Researchers, engineers, psychologists. They arrived quietly. No uniforms. No cameras at first. They didn't dismiss us. They listened. They measured. They noticed what we had noticed. Temperature inconsistencies along interior walls. Unusual acoustics in certain rooms. Spatial compression detectable only through prolonged exposure. One of them, a woman named Mireia, stood in Elowen's room for a long time, hand pressed against the wall. "This structure was modified," she said. "There's something here that was never meant to be opened." That night, they set up recording equipment, not to capture sounds, but pressure changes, air displacement, structural response. We slept in the living room. I didn't sleep at all. Sometime later, again, no sense of when, the house reacted. Not violently, defensively. The pressure spikes registered first, rapid, uneven surges along the second floor. Elowen whimpered in her sleep. Then every device shut down at once. Silence swallowed the house, and in that silence I felt it. Movement, not across the floor, within the walls, like something learning the contours of its cage. Elowen sat upright, eyes unfocused. "It's closer to me now," she said calmly. It thinks I fit. Mireia whispered, "It's forming an attachment." Rowan begged them to stop. They didn't, because something had already been set in motion. The house wasn't haunted. It was occupied. And whatever had been pressed into those narrow spaces for so long had finally found a way to stretch. Through my daughter, there's a moment when fear matures, where it stops feeling sharp. It becomes deliberate. That's where we were when the house began behaving less like a structure and more like a presence with preferences. After the researchers' equipment went dark that night, none of us trusted the silence that followed. Silence, I learned, isn't the absence of activity. It's what happens when something doesn't need to announce itself anymore. Elowen didn't sleep again. She lay still, eyes open, breathing shallow, as if she were afraid even the sound of air leaving her lungs might attract attention. Rowan stayed pressed against her side, one arm wrapped tightly around her, refusing to close her own eyes. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, watching the hallway. Nothing moved, but the hallway felt narrower than it had the day before. Not visually, physically, like the space itself had leaned inward. Mireia and her team didn't pack up in the morning. They spoke quietly among themselves, glancing often toward Elowen's room, their expressions shifting from curiosity to concern. One of them, Jonah, a structural analyst, pulled me aside. "This isn't residual," he said. "Whatever's here isn't repeating old behavior. It's responding." "Responding to what?" I asked. He hesitated. "Your daughter?" Elowen stopped eating, not out of protest or illness, out of distraction. She'd lift a fork, pause, then slowly set it down again, eyes drifting toward the walls, as if listening for instructions only she could hear. When Rowan asked her what she was thinking about, Elowen answered without hesitation. "It keeps asking how I fit." Rowan's face drained of color. "What does that mean?" she asked. Elowen frowned. "I don't know. It's trying to learn where I bend." That afternoon, Mireia asked if Elowen would be willing to draw again. Not for analysis, not for data, for expression. They gave her charcoal and paper and let her sit where she felt most comfortable, on the living room floor, back against the couch. She drew without stopping for nearly an hour. When she finished, no one spoke. The image showed a long, flattened figure pressed into a narrow vertical space. Its limbs were bent at angles that didn't look painful, just practiced. Efficient. Where its face should have been, Elowen had shaded the paper darker, heavier. "It doesn't need a face," she said quietly. "It watches sideways." That was the day Rowan insisted we leave for good, not temporarily, not overnight. She started packing bags, hands shaking but movements decisive. The house reacted immediately. Doors resisted being opened. Boxes felt heavier than they should have been. The air thickened again, pressing against our chests. Elowen clutched her head. "It doesn't want us to take things," she whispered. "It thinks they belong to the walls." Mireia stepped between Elowen and the hallway. "No," she said firmly. "They don't." The house answered. A low-pressure surge rippled through the floor, subtle but unmistakable. The walls creaked, not loudly but deeply, like something adjusting its posture. Jonah muttered something under his breath. "What?" I asked. "It's compressing," he said, "reducing internal space." That was when the first visible deformation occurred. Not cracks, not breaks. The wall beside Elowen's room curved inward, just enough to notice. Rowan screamed. Elowen didn't. She stepped forward, drawn by something none of us could see. "It's trying to make a place," she said. like the one it remembers. Mireya grabbed her shoulders. Elowen, listen to me. Whatever you think it wants, it doesn't get to decide. Elowen blinked, confusion flickering across her face. But it's been here longer, she said. It says the walls were made for it. That night, the researchers attempted something risky. They called it a spatial intervention. They identified the narrow zones, areas where pressure and temperature anomalies overlapped, and began opening sections of the walls, not tearing them down, exposing them. Behind the drywall, they found layers that didn't belong. Not insulation, partitions. Thin, reinforced panels arranged vertically, creating long, constricted compartments that ran through the house like veins. Some were sealed, some weren't. One of them opened into a space barely wide enough for a body to turn sideways. The smell that came out wasn't rot, it was stale air. Old breath. Elowen covered her nose. That's where it stayed. Rowan backed away, tears streaming down her face. Who would build this? She whispered. Mireya answered without looking away. People who believed confinement was safer than compassion. The intervention didn't free anything. It angered it. The house began shifting in ways that defied normal physics. Angles felt wrong. Rooms seemed longer than before. The hallway outside Elowen's room appeared to stretch, its end pulling farther away the closer you got. Elowen started speaking differently, not possessed, not altered, just informed. It remembers being pressed, she said one evening. It remembers not being allowed to turn. It remembers learning how to disappear. She looked at me then. And now, it knows how I move. That was the sentence that broke me. I realized then that whatever had been contained within those narrow spaces hadn't simply survived. It had adapted. It had learned to exist without occupying space the way we do. And Elowen, small, flexible, perceptive, was the perfect template. Rowan confronted Mireya. You said this wasn't a haunting, she said, voice shaking with anger. You said it wasn't intelligent. Mireya didn't argue. I said it wasn't a ghost, she replied. I never said it wasn't aware. The final escalation came quietly. I was in the hallway when it happened. The air thickened again, pressing against my ears. The walls on either side of me felt closer, their surfaces warm, almost breathing. Elowen stepped out of the living room. Her posture was different, more precise. She moved with a careful economy of motion, as if conserving space. Elowen, I said, my voice cracking. Come here. She tilted her head. It's learning where I end, she said, and where it can begin. I lunged for her. The hallway contracted, not visually, spatially. I felt pressure on my shoulders, my chest, my ribs, forcing me sideways. For a terrifying moment, I understood. I understood how something could be pressed into a narrow place long enough that it stopped fighting. Elowen didn't reach the wall. Mireya did. She pulled Elowen back, breaking whatever alignment had been forming. The pressure released. The hallway returned to normal dimensions. The house fell silent. That night, we didn't stay. We left with what we could carry. The researchers sealed the exposed partitions as best they could, not to contain what was there, but to prevent it from using the structure again. As we drove away, Elowen stared out the window. It's still there, she said softly, but it doesn't know how to follow yet. Rowan asked the question neither of us wanted answered. Will it learn? Elowen didn't respond. She didn't need to, because some places don't let go of what they've shaped. And some things, once given a form, never forget it. People assume escape is an ending. It isn't. It's a pause. We left the house on Alder Creek Road with the kind of speed that feels less like movement and more like flight. Clothes stuffed into bags without order. Documents grabbed without thinking. Elowen barefoot in the back seat, wrapped in Rowan's coat like a shield she didn't fully trust. The town disappeared behind us quietly. No final protest from the house. No dramatic collapse. No parting gesture. That should have frightened me more than anything else. For the first time in weeks, Elowen slept in the car. Not a deep sleep. Her fingers twitched occasionally, her brow creasing as if she were navigating unfamiliar terrain, even in rest. But sleep nonetheless. Rowan drove. I watched the road and tried not to think about what we'd left behind. We stayed in 3 different places over the next 2 weeks. A friend's spare room, a rented cabin near a lake, a short-term apartment arranged by Mireya's organization under the guise of relocation support. Each place felt lighter, but Elowen didn't. The physical symptoms faded first. The headaches stopped. Her appetite returned in cautious steps. Her energy crept back. The awareness did not. She still tracked walls with her eyes, still paused in doorways, still measured spaces with an instinct I couldn't unsee once I recognized it. One night, while Rowan slept, Elowen sat beside me on the couch. "Dad," she asked, "can something remember how it was shaped?" I didn't answer immediately. "I think so," I said carefully. She nodded. "It remembers me." The researchers didn't cut contact. Mireya visited twice. Jonah once. They never suggested we return. They never said the situation was resolved. Instead, they spoke in careful language about risk mitigation, spatial memory, environmental influence, about how certain built spaces leave impressions, not just on people, but on what they contain. I asked Mireya the question that had been eating me alive. "Is it gone?" She didn't lie. "No," she said. "It's stable." That word haunted me. Stable didn't mean harmless. Stable meant waiting. The house was sealed, the partitions reinforced, the property quietly removed from the market under a non-disclosure agreement, framed as a structural liability. Officially, nothing paranormal was acknowledged. Unofficially, the town exhaled. We moved again. Farther this time. New state, new street, new walls. Rowan tried to rebuild normalcy with a determination that bordered on desperation. New routines, new neighbors, new schools. Elowen adapted. On the surface, she made friends. She laughed again. She slept in her own room. But sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, she pressed her palm flat against the wall beside her bed and stood very still. I stopped asking what she felt. Some answers change the shape of the person who hears them. Months passed, then years. The house on Alder Creek Road faded into something we referenced only in moments of weakness or quiet honesty, a shared understanding that didn't need retelling. Elowen grew taller, less flexible, more defined in her movements. I dared to hope. Until the night I found her in the hallway of our new home, standing sideways, her shoulder brushing the wall. "What are you doing?" I asked gently. She startled, then smiled. "Nothing," she said. "Just checking." "Checking what?" "How much space I take now." That was the moment I understood something fundamental. Whatever had been confined within those narrow partitions hadn't simply tried to escape. It had studied. It had learned what it meant to exist in reduced space. And in doing so, it had left its imprint on Elowen. Not possession, not influence. Education. One evening, years later, Mireya contacted me unexpectedly. She didn't sound alarmed. She sounded tired. "They've reported activity near the property again," she said. "Not inside." "Then where?" "In adjacent structures." Sheds, retaining walls, anywhere narrow enough to hold pressure. I felt cold. Is it moving? She paused. It's testing. I didn't tell Rowan. I didn't tell Elowen. I started paying attention again, to how spaces felt, to how walls carried sound, to how some corners felt attentive. Elowen noticed my vigilance. "You're doing it again," she said one night. "Doing what?" "Listening for places." I met her eyes. "Are you still connected to it?" She considered the question carefully. "I don't think so," she said. "But I think it knows how to look now." "What does that mean?" She hesitated. "Before, it needed walls. Now it understands edges." That answer followed me into sleep and out of it again. The final confirmation came quietly. A letter, forwarded through Mireya's network. An incident report from another town. Different state. Similar architecture. A child complaining that the walls felt closer. No injuries. No conclusions. Just observations. Rowan found me holding the letter. She didn't need to read it to know. "We can't keep running," she said softly. "I know." "So what do we do?" I looked down the hallway toward Elowen's room. The door was open. Light spilled into the corridor, steady and warm. "We stay aware," I said. "We don't ignore things that feel wrong." Rowan nodded. "And if it comes back?" I didn't answer right away. "Then we remember something it never had," I said finally. "What's that?" "Choice." Elowen grew into someone remarkable, not because of what happened to her, but because of how she refused to let it define her. She studied architecture in college, specialized in humane design, spaces meant to comfort rather than compress. She once told me she wanted to build places where nothing felt trapped. I believe her. But sometimes, when we visit older buildings, when corridors narrow or stairwells feel too enclosed, I see her pause. Just for a second. Measuring. Listening. As if checking whether the world has learned the wrong lesson again. People still argue about places like that house. They ask whether it was psychological, environmental, structural. They want neat explanations. I don't give them one. Because some histories don't stay buried, and some structures remember what they were built to do. If you live in an old place, if certain spaces make you feel smaller than you should, if walls feel too attentive, you don't owe them anything, and you don't have to find out what they've learned.